Hello, everyone. This is Rick with the Cyber Pro podcast. Industry leaders share their insights, about 5 questions and hopefully under 9 minutes because hackers never sleep. Question number 1, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me, Rick. So my name is Phillip Hankel. I am a SOC Analyst with Ideal Integration's Security Division, Blue Bastion. So as a team, we kind of do MDR, IR, managed endpoint security, microsegmentation, that sort of thing. Specifically as an analyst, I'm primarily monitoring the client's environments and triaging alerts and looking for things that are suspicious within the environment and working with the client to do remediation. Outside of that, I'm also a student, so I'm pretty busy.
Way busy. Now, you talk to me about what you're doing for education. You're going into the digital forensics world, right?
Yeah, computer forensics and digital investigations through Champlain College.
Nice. What made you want to go into that space?
So as I was sort of coming into my analyst role, I realized that there was still a lot of things that I wasn't quite sure of, and so I kind of, as I was getting into it though, I found that I really liked the investigative aspect of doing analyst work. And so I wanted to take that and kind of drill into that more and just kind of see what was under there, just because, that's one of the great things about cyber, right? Is that there's just layers upon layers to kind of dig through.
No, for sure. And that's a perfect segue into the official question number 2, which is, why do you love being a cyber professional?
Yeah. So for me personally, I think while that is certainly an aspect of it, is that there's infinite opportunities to learn. I think for me, actually, the primary thrust of it is that it's sort of this interplay between creative thinking and logical, technical thinking. Prior to coming to cyber, I was kind of always felt pulled between the two and felt like I kind of had to choose. So I originally was going in an engineering direction, and then later I was actually pursuing a 3D character animation. And so I've always kind of had this artist on one shoulder and engineer on the other. And then I felt cyber was able to take those two kind of methodologies and of thinking and combine them in one space, and then also add the bonus of being able to help people and protect people doing meaningful work. And so I think that's what I love about cyber personally.
Awesome. I'm excited for this next answer because you have a couple different perspectives to give us on it, but tell me what the next statement means to you. Cybersecurity is a top concern.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think I have a kind of a dual thoughts about this. So on the one hand, I think there are a lot of important questions being asked right now because it is kind of part of the cultural zeitgeist and people are becoming more aware of cyber. And so we are starting to ask a lot of questions and the public is getting more engaged in the conversation, which is great to see. On the other hand, though, I kind of worry a little bit just because, I see top concern, and I think the operative word there is concern, which by its very nature is not a word of action, it's a word of inaction. And so I think when I see that, I'm concerned that it might be a top concern, but it's not a top priority for these different organizations. And there's a lot of talk, but there's not a whole lot of concrete action being taken. And, I think as much as we'd like to talk about the sophistication of attacks increasing and increasing, I think actually what we're seeing is an increase of attacks, but a lot of them are not all that sophisticated. And there's still a massive amount of low hanging fruit out there in terms of basic cybersecurity hygiene and practices that could be put in place, like MFA and just, strong passwords and just super basic stuff that would prevent a lot of these attacks that we're seeing.
I'm going to throw a bonus question at you because you use some great language and verbiage. How do we have people take it from a top concern to a top priority?
Yeah, so that's the question, right? So I think the idea is that we want to be able to sit down and actually have like a concrete conversation and put things into action. So we need to create a framework or a plan. Obviously the government is trying to do things right now to sort of solidify things, but especially when it comes to like your SMBs, we really need to be able to sit down with them, especially in like companies like mine, which work a lot with small and medium-sized businesses as well as bigger business. But we need to be able to lay down a plan and actually kind of work through it with them, what the specific steps that need to be taken are, and then come up with a specific plan of action that's tailored to their environment. Because I think, there's a lot of companies that's like, buy this ML or this AI, and we'll just protect your environment. But it's like, no, it's kind of like when you go to the doctor's office and they're like, okay, you have this problem. You can either take this pill and there might be some side effects, or you can actually put in the work and exercise and live a healthier lifestyle. And unfortunately, a lot of companies would prefer the former rather than the latter. But I think it's worth doing the hard work to actually sit down and come up with a concrete plan.
No, that's great. What insight do you want to share with our cyber community?
Yeah, so as obviously I'm relatively junior within the industry, but I think one thing that for me in particular that's very meaningful is education. So I can, besides being a literal student, I consider myself a continuous student, and I think there's a lot of value in education right now that is like not being fully utilized within the industry. So I think one thing to consider is that while technical skills are incredibly important and fostering them is incredibly important, I think that we oftentimes will ignore the value of things outside of the industry or in areas that are not the area we're attempting to develop within. So for example, I'm a big proponent of STEAM over STEM. So STEM, we have traditionally science, technology, engineering, mathematics, whereas STEAM is the addition of arts into there. So, as a former artist, I think there's a lot of things to be said about what that value adds into the matrix of cybersecurity. So, I mean, if we think of what art is and what creativity is, I think, at least personally, while I don't want to define the space at the fear of being, but so I think personally that artists kind of are able to express a multi plurality of different ideas and concepts and then simplify them and then present them in a way that people can understand intuitively rather than necessarily through a ton of data and numbers that are hard to express. And I think personally, I think as an analyst, I like being able to look at all this different data and then pivot, and it's sort of like almost fractalized. And then you kind of pull these different strings together and you're able to put them into a more comprehensive picture. Another thing I think just it's important to remember that learning is not only a continuous process, but it doesn't mean you always have to be beating yourself down day after day. I think we tend to think of it like, if I'm not growing this instant, then I'm kind of falling behind. And while there is something to be said to be continuously growing, I think it's better that we take this mindset rather than one that'll lead to burnout, as to take the mindset of like, this is kind of like, the real world. There are seasons. Like a farmer will tell you, there's a season to reap and there's a season to sow. There's a season to rest and there's a season to grow. And so, that's the kind of philosophy I think we need to take more on, because I think we're seeing a ton of mental health issues and burnout within the industry. And so I think we need to be more attendant to taking care of ourselves and recognize that while we should be continuously growing, that it's not going to happen all at once.
I love it. And I love the idea that you bring forth about creativity, maybe guided by logic. That's the way I think of it. So Philip, fun question.
Sure.
What's your favorite piece of retro technology that makes you smile?
Yeah, so I thought about this for a little while. So when I thought about the question, I naturally sort of looked at like what was my vector into the technology space as a kid, and I really, the thing that first came to mind was playing Banjo Kazooie with my dad on the Nintendo 64. It was just such a great game, and the 3D platforming genre, I'm sure, not only encouraged my interest in technology but also my interest in 3D animation and 3D art. And I think just the console itself was a great introduction to IT troubleshooting. You're making sure that your TV's on the right channel, all the audio and video cables are plugged in right. Okay, it's still not working. All right, pull out the cartridge, blow on it, stick it back in, make sure all the controllers are plugged in right. And so, yeah, it's a good opportunity to kind of get introduced to it at a young age.
It's amazing, Philip. Thank you so much for being on the Cyber Pro podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great to be here.
You did it. You made it to the end. Check us out for future podcasts and more content.